take attendance.
Yeah, it'll be all right, Haley. Just go ahead and get started. You can go ahead and go.
Okay, sounds good. All right, and y'all bear with me because this is a tough one, but I'm confident. So. Okay. Does everybody see the web page and the VS Code on the right? Good to go. Okay, so basically, everything, can y'all hear me okay? Everything's good? Okay. So basically, this is going to be our DOM manipulation lab. So basically, the objective is to use all DOM, which is document object model manipulation, in your JavaScript file. So it's basically a way to interact with HTML from your JavaScript file without having to write any HTML in your index.html. The logic of this lab is pretty much up to you in terms of how you decide to achieve the functionality. But basically, it just wants you to append everything from the JavaScript file directly into the HTML. So the first thing it wants you to do is to create a button and label it add square so that we can give it the ability to append those divs onto the page and add the squares. So, oh, and I've already gotten my HTML all set up. So we have our boilerplate here. I've already linked my style sheet and I've already linked my JavaScript file. And then I've created a CSS file and a JavaScript file. So the first thing, and is this the font? Okay, do I need to make it larger on the JavaScript? That look okay for y'all? All right, so the first thing that you want to do is asking you to create a button. So we're going to create a variable. I'm going to name it add square button. And then actually I'm going to turn off my Copilot. There we go. Okay. So to do this, we need to create a variable to hold the button. So that's what the add square button is. And then we're going to place it on the document. And then create the element. And we're going to name it button. So basically, the create element, it's a predefined function that creates elements and you have to pass it a valid HTML keyword. So, you know, button, div, anchor, h1, and it will create it as long as you pass it a valid HTML keyword. Next thing you want to do is add it to add that text content to the button. So since the button's going to add squares, I'm just going to say add square. We're going to target the variable add square button and then add the text content and let it say add square. Okay. The next thing we want to do is append that to the web page. So that's going to be append child and put your variable inside there. And that should give you your button on the page right there. All right, the next thing it wants you to do is when the button is clicked, a new div should be added to the page. So we want to create an anonymous callback function, an event listener for it to listen for the clicks, right? So we're going to target that variable and then add the event listener to it. Okay, and inside of here, we want to create a new div each time it's clicked. So we're going to make a variable, new div, because that's what we're trying to do. And then we're going to create element each time that new div is accessed. So document. And then put a div inside of there. Okay. So let me move my control, my meeting controls, they're in the way. There we go. Okay. So, all right, the next thing we want to do is to actually, so each time that click you, sorry, let me find my place. Okay, so basically everything else that we do in this lab is going to be under the click listener, because that's every time we click that, that's going to be all of our functionality. Let's see, so we've added the div. Hey, Josh, can you give me just 1 second?
Yeah, what's up?
Sorry, I just got kind of lost in what I was doing.
No worries. Which
Um,
step are you on?
we're adding the div.
Yeah, const new div. So you made the div and then you want to I don't know, append it to the page or add the class name so you
Yeah.
can style it.
Okay.
Probably
Yeah.
getting them on the page would be the next step.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
So basically, we want to, okay, so let's go ahead and get them put on the page. So you want to append the, okay, so we're going to say, but it wants you to, you want to create like a container for the divs to go in so that when you style them later, they go across the page, because right now they're just going to go straight down. So let's go ahead and create that container. So I'm going to do that up here. So I'm going to do document. I'm sorry, we need to do the. Let's just call it square holder, since it's going to be holding all of our squares. And then let that be a div. So we're going to create an element called div. Okay. And then let's go ahead and give the holder and ID and call it square holder so we can style it in the CSS. And then we're going to give the div a class name so that we can style the squares inside of the div as well. So we'll call square holder and give it an ID, and let's call it square holder. Caps lock. There we go. And then we're going to append. So basically we want to append the square holder. And then we want to append the new divs into the square holder so that they'll be inside of that every time that that button's clicked. So we'll put that inside of the event listener for the click. Square holder. And we'll put then the divs inside there. So new div.
On line 6, I use a class instead of an ID. Does that really matter?
No, you can use either one because the styling is going to be the same as long as you target that class instead of the ID. So,
Okay.
Let's see. So we have our container that's holding the squares, and now we're appending all of the squares inside of the container. And then we want to give the divs and a class name, right? So let's go ahead and do that as well. Div. Name, and then let's let them equal square. Okay, so that should be, what am I missing? Why do I have that? And then there's okay, so we have that. Let's open up the inspector. And it's giving us a new div each time. You can see right here. Square, 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 right? So that should be good. So let's go ahead and put some styling on the square so that we can see them on the page. So the first one is going to be the class square because we want to style the actual squares that are inside of the square holder. And then let's give them a width, 100 pixels, and a height, 100 pixels. And then they want the, when the button is clicked, you should have 7 squares, and then it wants us to give each square a background color, right, of black. So, and then what else does it want? The square should flow horizontally across the page. So the reason that I made that ID for the square, the container, is so that we could put the flex on the actual holder of the squares. So each one of those squares is going to file underneath like this until we put them inside of the container that's going to make the direction, the flex direction, go across the page. So we have the squares on the page now. Pull this over. So each time it's going to just file underneath, right? Because we haven't styled the container that's holding the divs. So the next thing we want to do, I'm just going to throw a little margin on each one of the squares. So like, I don't know, 0.5 PM. And that's going to separate the squares, right? Because it has margin around them. And then let's go ahead and style the container holding the square so that they align properly on the page. So we need to target the ID that we gave the container, which was square holder. My fingers don't want to work today, guys, sorry. Okay. Spell square right. There we go. And then a way we can do this is we can use Flexbox. So we can do display flex. And then that should make them go, you know, in the container. And then we can just do flex wrap, I believe, and that will make them drop down once they hit the edge of the page. Okay, cool.
Hey, Haley, can you disable Copilot while you're,
Yes.
you know, it just
I
like
thought
pops
I
up
did
and stuff.
already. I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Oh, I just did it for the JavaScript page. My bad. Sorry, y'all. So basically that's going to make them align in each and then drop down each time that it hits the edge of the page. You can check this by adjusting your page like this so that you know that it's responsive. Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my mic. I had a question.
Sure, what's that?
On your square holder,
Mhm.
what I can't remember. Why was it we were using a hashtag sign instead of a period again?
Oh, because we gave the container an ID instead of a class name.
Oh,
So we called it, we gave the square holder the ID, and then we gave the div inside of the container a class name, just so that you can kind of keep them separate. And also the ID overrides the class name. So I just kind of wanted that to be, since it's holding the divs, it to be the
yeah, I got you.
more important styling. Okay, so the next thing, is everybody okay with where I'm at so far? And how we got there? We have our listener that's listening for each div. Okay. So the next thing it wants you to do is to, in each div, you should have an ID with a numerical value equivalent to the total number of squares. So a way that we can achieve this is we can do a counter for each one of the divs, right? So we could say, create a variable for the number of squares. So let's go ahead and do that. We can say, let number of squares, let number of square equal 0. And then inside here, we could make the squares go up each time we access that variable with the, this adds 1 to each one of the squares. And then, let's see. And then let's target the variable for each div. So new div, and then add an ID. This adds a unique ID to each square if we target the number of squares. So that should give us in our, yeah, so this is going to give us a ID, and it's going to count up each time we add a square. 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, and then okay, and then it says 7 squares have been added to the page. You should run into a case where 2. Okay, we're still up here. So we've added a unique ID each time to total the number of squares that have been added, and then you should, the next thing it wants you to do is to, oh, so we need to make them appear in the actual square. So in order to do that, we basically just need to give the ID a styling. So we need to give it a color. Let's just give it white. And then size. And then okay, so it wants you, it wants the ID to appear inside of the square every time you mouse over. So you're going to create a listener for the mouse entering the square and the mouse exiting the square. So in order to do that, we need to create another anonymous function. So let's go ahead and do that inside of our click function, right? This all needs to go inside of here. So let's say, let's target the div. And then add event listener for the event, which is the mouse over. And then we want to target the div text content whenever we mouse over. And that should target that to make it so that whenever you mouse over, you're getting a number in each square, right? Because every time we enter the square, it's targeting the div and the ID from the CSS. Does that make sense? Does anybody have any questions about that? And then if you want your number to be in the middle of the page, you can just give it like we did. What was the lab where we gave it a line height? I think it was the X's and O's and the tic-tac-toe. So you can say line height 100 pixels since our divs are 100 by 100. And that should, and then we can text align center to get everything in the middle of the box. Awesome. Okay, so now we just need to create a event so that when the mouse exits that the ID goes away, the unique ID for each square. So let's do that. Okay, so the next thing is the same thing. So we're just going to create a event listener on the div, but we're going to call it mouse out this time. And there's a couple different, I don't know how to see all the, but there's like mouse enter, I think. There's a couple different ways to do this. And I remember when I first did this lab, I tried each one, but, and maybe Josh can go a little bit more in depth on why this one specifically works. But yeah, you just kind of have to mess around with it. I think that the mouse enter and mouse leave, it like doesn't work because it every time you move the mouse within the div, it listens for the event. So you just kind of have to figure out which one works best for what you need the functionality to do. So the mouse out event is going to be and then we're going to open up that function. And then in here, we just want to set the div's content to nothing so that once it leaves, it doesn't, and it recognizes that there's nothing in the div so that it will make the ID go away. So we're just going to set it to nothing whenever we leave the square that's holding the ID. So we can do new div and then text content and then set that to an open string or an empty string. Okay, and that should take care of the mouse over event so that we get the ID when we're mousing into the box, and then when we leave, it disappears. Does anybody have any questions about this portion?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay.
So I did for the event listener, you had your event mouse over, and then
Mhm.
instead of doing the function in there, called a function that was outside of the add square button event listener. Is that the advantage to that being only if you plan on calling the function numerous times? Because this, I'm assuming you don't have, it's not called anything, so it's not a function you're going to be able to call again.
Are you
elsewhere.
talking about the anonymous function for the mouse over event?
Right.
Okay,
I have that outside I wrote the function outside of that.
of the click listen or of the click listener function.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, Josh, can you help me answer why you want it all inside of the click listener?
Sorry, repeat the question, Turner.
Yeah. So I wrote the functions outside of where she is now, that the event listener click function. And so where instead of its same function, I put over, and then I wrote the function outside of that.
You mean just for the, oh, okay, like just for line 20, just for its function?
Right. And I guess the advantage to that, or the only reason to write it outside of that, is if I was to call it more than once or elsewhere.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, when I was going back through this, I mean, you want everything inside of your click function because once you click to add a square, everything is still inside of that scope that you want, like when
Right.
you want the mouse over and mouse leave event to happen. Does that
Right.
make
So
sense?
for the new div, that everything's needs to be inside there because new div is scoped to the div that you're currently making. So doing everything while that's still scoped in makes sense. And then for all of the event listener, the functions you want to run when the event listener is triggered tied to that div, unless you're going to reuse those, like Turner was saying, there's no point in defining it
Yeah.
elsewhere.
I didn't think you could do it this way at all. Or I did it a completely different way.
How did you do it?
Yeah.
I did it by having the text to show the ID in a separate subdiv.
Oh,
And I set the display property to either visible or hidden.
But you still kept your callbacks. Did you?
Yes.
Regarding the
The main
callbacks,
thing that I'm trying to wrap my mind around is how the div can keep track of its ID outside of the having the text content. I guess it has to do with the fact that with the way callbacks can store the variables.
So you mean on line 21?
Yes.
How when you're saying
How
new
new
div.id, how
doesn't
that's
go out of
still.
scope.
I see. Because
Or
well, each
when-
div gets its ID property. So it is if it's referencing it from the ID property in the HTML.
Oh, right. That makes sense. Never mind.
I'm trying to think if I just told you the wrong thing. I don't think I did.
I think that that's right. Yeah, because we're keeping track of the IDs and with the counter, but then we're targeting the text content
Right, never mind.
by the ID, right? Okay, awesome. No, these are good questions. So keep them coming because then I don't feel so alone. Okay.
It does feel that way, Haley, right? You're just like,
I
oh,
I know
man.
it's like you're just here. Okay.
I didn't
Um,
sleep too well last night, so my brain might not be working at full capacity.
no, I understand. 10 a.m. walkthroughs are tough for everybody to like get everything going this early. So basically, yeah, we've created the events for the when your mouse goes into your square and exits the square and it displays the current ID. So what's the next thing it wants us to do? So it wants us to create a function so that every time the square is clicked, it changes to a random background color. Okay, so the easiest way to do this is to basically just, I mean, somebody's already written a function that creates a random color, right? So you can just look it up. I remember when I first did this lab, I tried to go the route of just like creating an array and looping through that array for that click, but you don't really have access to, I mean, you only have so many colors as you feel like writing into an array, right? So let's just look up a function for a random color. So here we go right here. We can do this one. Actually, let's do one that has a loop in it. Okay, this one looks good. So basically it's just saying, hey, let's have a function that every time we, it goes, so basically hex colors are any 6 characters, right? So you can, with a pound sign. So you can have all the numbers 1 through 9 and then A, B, C, D, E, F. And then you can have that looping through this string, and as long as it's less than 6, and then putting it with the pound sign. So does that make sense why this works? It's basically just giving any random combination of six letters and numbers with the pound sign and then returning it as the color. So let's just copy that and paste that into our code.
What's the times 16? What's that accomplish?
So this is saying color plus letters, right? So that's giving a pound sign plus 6 of the letters, and that's, yeah, I don't know what's the times 16.
The amount of
16.
characters
So-
in the string.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, in the string, that's right.
Because it's saying math floor, math. Have we gone over math floor, math random?
I don't think we have yet.
Okay.
Or rounds
yeah.
it down, right?
Floor, yeah. So math random gives you a random number between 0 and whatever you're multiplying it times. So in this case, 16. But the problem with that is that decimals. So math floor makes it like, I believe like Turner said, rounds it down to where it's just a flat number.
Oh yeah.
I still don't get why do you multiply it? I get there 16.
I think that's just the syntax for it.
So like with math floor, instead of it being like 27.24, it's just a flat 27 kind of thing.
Yeah.
I got you.
Right.
Okay.
The thing, there's a difference. So there's math.round, which rounds the way you were taught in school, where if it's 5 or above, then it
Mhm.
rounds it up, and if it's below, it rounds it down. Math.floor always rounds down. 2.8, math.floor it is 2.
Okay.
Math.ceal is the opposite, where if I take 2.2, math.ceal is 3.
Okay.
'Cause there's a lot of times you want to just keep something within a limit, so you floor it.
I got you.
And he's math.random. You can kind of walk through these, but math.random generates a number, I think between 0 and 1. And then if you multiply that by 16, you get the range between, I think between 0 and 16. And then if you floor it, it gets rid of the decimal.
Right.
It makes
It's-
sense if you look through it, but it's, yeah.
Yeah, you'll just have to go through like the documentation on those. It's because they're so specific and yeah, but yeah, the floor rounds it to a whole number, I believe. And then we're timesing it times the 16 because that's how many characters we have in the string. But basically you're just running a loop through that string and getting a random combination of 6 characters to create your hex code with a pound sign. So basically we want to keep this inside we want to put the function for the random color outside of the scope of our event listener for the click, but we want to put the functionality of accessing the color and appending it to each square to, get the random color inside of the click listener. So down here, we want to add an event listener for a double click, right? Isn't that what it said? We want to change the background color each time. Wait, no, just a regular click. Okay. So we would just want to do another click listener for the click to change the color. So we're going to target the div, right? And then we're going to add the event listener to the div again. And then we're going to do the anonymous function for a click. Open that up again. Okay, and inside this function, we want to call the function for the random color, right? So let's target the div again.
Anyone else hear that?
Yes,
I hear it too.
It's
I
the
hear it.
fans. It's the fans on our laptop.
Oh, is it? I'm sorry. Is it super loud? I don't have a mic that's not like right up on my laptop. It's just the one that goes through it. Is it
Yeah.
really
I
annoying?
mean, we can still understand you. It's okay. If you had a
Okay.
way to maybe like prop the computer up so it's cooled better, maybe, I don't know. But it's
Yeah,
fine.
I can try to put something under it and maybe that'll help it not be so. One second.
Like you're like getting abducted by aliens.
It sounds like I'm like taking off into space.
Honestly, I thought sirens were going off in the background. I've just been ignoring it.
Sorry. I didn't
You're all
realize-
good. Kind of like,
didn't
when a plane goes across.
Yeah, I didn't realize it was that noticeable. Okay, I put my laptop up on a book, so hopefully it'll get some more ventilation. This thing is like 8 years old, so let me know if that helps or not. We're almost through this though, so I'll try to get a noise canceling mic before the next walkthrough. Okay, so the next thing we want to, so this way, instead of using CSS, we can basically, since this is just like one attribute that we want to put on that div, we can just do it straight through the DOM. So let's just access the DOM through here. I don't know what happened. What did I make? What did I do? What is happening? I'm sorry, I hit something when I full screened my I don't know.
You
how
hit
to-
F11.
I think maybe. Okay, thank you. I was like, what did I do? I full screen my. Okay, so let's just access that div, the styling of the div straight through the DOM. So we'll just call style. And then we will target the background color of the div. And when you do it through the DOM, you just write it in camel case just like that. So it's background capital color. And then let's let that equal, we're going to, so down here, let's create a variable for the function. So I'll say let color, and then we'll call the function with that get random color with that variable. And then back up here, we'll say we'll do random color in here, and then we'll wait. No, we need to put this in here. We need to put this inside of the function that we want it so that the scope is right. So we'll say let random color equal this calling this function, so that every time, and then we can just put the variable in here so that every time we click the div, it gives us a random color. Close this function, and let's go see if that worked. Did not work. What am I missing?
Check the console.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Okay. Cannot access random color before initiation. So that's on number 29. Does this need to be before this?
Right.
Like that, because it was awesome. Okay, yeah. So you need to, since I defined that variable, you need to call the function before you can use, or use the variable is calling the function. So you have to put that before you actually use it in the style. Cool. Yeah. And that's how you use your console to fix your bugs. So now we're getting a random color set to the background color every time we click a square. And then if you click it again, it should change to a random color. Does that make sense how that's working, everybody? Okay. All right, we're on the very last part. So the last part is basically every time you double click a square, you want, if the square is even, to remove the, if it's even, the square after the click square should be removed. So the one that's to the right should be removed. And if there isn't a square after the click square, display an alert indicating so. And if the ID is odd, the square before the click square should be removed. So the one to the left. Okay. So how did everybody go about doing this? Because this kind of threw me for a loop when I was in the class.
Did a for loop, you said?
No, the
No, I'm just messing with you.
okay. Yeah, I was gonna say yeah, well, that's how I thought. Like, it took me forever to figure out that there was an actual like function that you could, like, that was built in that would listen for the previous sibling or the next sibling, right? So but yeah, that's, I don't really know how else you would be able to do this without the next sibling. What is that? Just like a built-in function, right? So basically,
next sibling is a function. I think it's just a property.
it's just a property. Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, so you're just targeting that property and it targets the, there's previous element sibling, there's previous sibling, but that basically just targets the element to the right and the left of your div. So basically for this, you just want to, so create an event listener and you do the same thing, just make it a double click function. So we're going to target each div and then add the event listener, just like we did for the click function, but This one is going to be a listen for a double click. And then open that function up. And then, so the way that I would go about doing this is doing if else statements. And I also didn't know that you could nest if else statements. So basically we want to write an if else that's checking for even or odd. And then inside of those, we want to check if it has a sibling or if it does not have a sibling. So let's go ahead and write the first if else statement. So the first one is going to check for even, right? So we're going to check the new div with our modulo operator to check if the square is even. So we're going to check if the ID is divisible by 2. And then if it is, we want to target the next sibling. And if, or else we want to alert that there is no sibling. So inside of this if statement for even, we want to say if the div next sibling. Okay, and then we want to remove, right? So sibling, and then we can call that remove. Okay, so and then our else statement is going to be alert that there is no next sibling. Alert. There's no. Okay, and then so this is our nested if else statement. So if is divisible by 2, we'll remove the next sibling. If there isn't a next sibling, we'll alert there's no next sibling. And then our second portion of the else statement is we want to do the else statement for the outside. And then inside of that if else statement, we want to say if the previous sibling, if it's not an even square, to remove the previous sibling. So we'll say else here, let me scroll this up a little bit. Else if new div previous sibling, and then we'll say if, right, new div is previous sibling, then we want to target the new div's previous sibling. And then remove it. And then statement for this one is to alert that there's no previous sibling. So alert. Should see. Not gonna bump up there. Okay, let me make sure everything looks right. So if we have this modulo checks to see if the square is even. This checks to see if the square has a sibling, and this removes the sibling to the right. Else, if this removes this, if it's not an even square, this is going to remove the sibling to the left, and this alerts the user if there is no sibling to the left. Okay, so this should work. Syntax at the end of 65.
I think you got a missing curly somewhere in there.
Yeah. Else. That's the one. So we have the function that's holding that one. We have the if statement, the else, and that one's holding the alert, else.
I think you're missing the one that's holding all of those event listeners for the whole handler. Just add another curly brace, parentheses, and thing at the end of that.
Oh, the whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh, from the very top. That makes sense. You're right. Thank you. I took on the
Oh.
very top one and forgot to add it back. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Okay, so basically that's going to, we have all of our colors. So we have an even square. So the even is going to check and then remove the one to the right. Okay, that didn't work.
I think your argument should be DBL click too. Like instead of the whole
DBL, you're
word.
right.
Yeah.
You're right. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, so the 2 should remove the one to the right. That's right. And then the 5 should remove the one to the left. That's right. If there's nothing in front of the 1, we get one that says an alert that says no previous sibling. There's nothing to the right. There's no previous sibling. So everything is looking good, right? Do y'all see anything that I'm missing? Was there, so if it's odd, you should remove it from the page. If there's no, yeah, indicate there's an alert. Okay, I think that's everything, y'all. Do you have any questions about the if else statements and how you can nest them within each other? Or how we use the modulus to check for the even ID? Is everything pretty clear?
I do have a question about the if statement.
Okay, sure.
Can you bring up the VS Code real quick?
Oh, sorry.
Could you explain how the second if statement works? Because I thought the conditional should just be testing whether it's odd or even.
Yeah.
But maybe I just don't
so-
understand the previous sibling works.
Yeah, so this 34 is saying if the new div's ID is divisible by 2, so that's checking if the square is even. This if statement right here is saying it's checking the square if the square has a sibling. The next sibling is going to be the one to the right, right? So it's checking the one to the right of the div, and if it's even, if the current div is even, it's going to remove the sibling to the right.
So is that like next to like spatially with like on the page? Is that how the sibling works?
So since 6 is even, it's going to remove this div, the next sibling to the right.
Thinking of it in terms of the HTML structure, so the one that comes after it.
Oh, he's saying if you want to target number 8.
I was just answering his question right there. You're saying like,
Okay.
what is it looking at when you say next sibling? It's saying
Oh, I see what you're
look
Yeah,
at
like
the
what is it
sibling
targeting?
elements.
Okay.
Right. So if you double click, element, whatever, it looks at the HTML and says, what's the sibling that comes right after this one? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
Yeah, there was a couple other, like there was previous element sibling. So, and Josh, I was just kind of gonna ask also on this one, when you double click 8, why does it remove the sibling that's on the very end and not if it's, wouldn't it be the one that's directly next to it?
It's not, it's removing the one next to it, but because you
It
have
is.
it in a
It's
flex
just
box. Yeah,
It's taking that spot. Okay.
yeah,
That's what I
base,
thought.
yeah, make sure you're
Okay.
checking the numbers, right?
Right. So it is, so it's removing 10, which is the one right next to it. Okay.
Right.
It just looks like it's taking it from the end. That's what I was kind of confused about too. So an 11 is going to remove the one to the left because it's the previous sibling and it's a odd number. So we can go through that too. So this one is basically saying if the square is not even, remove the previous sibling, which is going to be the one to the left of the current div, and then alert if there's no previous sibling.
So it's not checking IDs to determine siblings. Siblings are just like the elements it's nested with.
Yeah, so the first line 34 is just to see like, okay, they double clicked one. What is this one that I double clicked? Is it even or odd? Because that I need to determine that before I can determine what I want to remove, because that changes, right? So I need to say like, is the one that was double clicked, is it even or odd? And that tells me, okay, it's even, I need to remove the next, or it's odd, I need to remove previous. So we have to determine that first. So that comes first. And then after we determine that it's even, then I need to check, is there even a sibling after it? Because there's an extra constraint of if there's not something after it and it's even, you just need to throw an alert. So if there is a next sibling, remove it. If there's not, alert.
Right. So there's no previous sibling to this one, right? So it's going to give me alert because there's nothing before it. And then there's nothing to the right of this one, so it's going to give me alert because it's on the beginning and the end.
If you click on like 8 and then it eliminates 9, and then you click on 8 again, will it then eliminate 10? Okay, right.
An independent chime. It's an independent check each time. And that's why, like, if you don't use, like when I did this lab, when I was in the class, I didn't know, the whole class never found next sibling, previous sibling. We were just trying to do it based on sorting the index or the ID of the one you just checked and then searching, like doing a search each time instead of just knowing there's one beside it. So it becomes much more difficult when you don't know that there's like a next sibling property.
Right.
Did you say it
Yeah.
would
That's
delete
good.
10?
Right. If I double click, so if we haven't deleted any and we double click 8 and there's a 9 beside it, deletes 9. And then there's a 10. So then it's 8, 10. If I double click 8 again, it deletes 10, or it should.
I got you. So it's acting like an individual, not part of an actual group. kind of thing.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I definitely think that should have been a hint down here.
Well, yeah, it helps.
It would have been really helpful, but you know, I don't know. This was one of those labs where they just kind of threw you out in the water and said, okay, swim. So, well, thank y'all for bearing with me. This is a pretty involved walkthrough, so
Got a question.
Yes, you did pretty good.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, what's up?
Going back to the beginning, what's the difference, or when and when is it not okay to add the document.add event listener DOM content loaded?
Oh yeah, so for this one, when you did it, Josh, I was looking and you said that you just don't include it on this one because we have that already accounted for here because everything is already loading before we get to the script. Is that right? Where you
Because there is no HTML, the only HTML is in the
because
Java. So
yeah, because you don't have to let's see,
if there was any HTML written at all, you would need to do the DOM content.
the content loaded.
It's about like your JavaScript edits the document. So
Right.
the HTML that's already loaded. If you try and do stuff using JavaScript to HTML that's not been loaded yet, then you'll get an error, obviously. If you if you do the DOM content loaded, it won't run the JavaScript that's inside the callback for that until the whole page is finished loading. Meaning all
So
the
if
HTML.
you wrote something in HTML but didn't modify it in the JavaScript,
right, it
still don't
wouldn't-
need the DOM.
you wouldn't get an error, right?
you don't need it,
Right.
the DOM
right,
content mode. Gotcha.
exactly.
But we
Right,
will
and-
learn more eloquent ways to make certain that our JavaScript gets executed at the correct time, won't we?
Execute at the correct time. In reference to editing HTML elements, you mean?
Yes.
Not that I know of, man. Actually,
Like, won't we go over the
Missing
properties like
stuff.
async and defer?
we'll go over async stuff, and we usually don't go over defer. Not usually, but we'll go over
Okay.
async in depth, but not relative to editing the HTML. You know.
Okay.
I'm just gonna push this to walk through while we're going over the final questions. But I'm done if everybody's finished. Josh, do y'all have any announcements for the rest of the day? Or Garrett?
No, we're just working on 99 lines
Thanks,
for
guys.
the rest of the day, guys. And we'll have a check-in this afternoon.
Yes, thank you again, Haley.
Oh, thank y'all so much.
Yeah, thanks,
Yeah,
Haley.
that was a tough one. So I feel for y'all. I'm glad that y'all got it. And it's kind of fun once you get all the functionality down and you can see why, it's good. I like labs that you have like instant, like you see things working as you create the functionality. So I think that this is a really cool lab that allows you to see how things target things and all that kind of stuff. So but yeah, I'll go ahead and push this to GitHub and then I'll see y'all in the co-working space after.
Yep. That's it, Gary. We good?
Haley, thank you. Thank you for introducing me to previous sibling and next sibling, because that was a hot mess that I just uploaded to.
Yeah, I honestly have no idea how you would do this lab without it, honestly.
So I did like a square element or square dot paternal uncle dot oldest brother dot remove child, and then like I
Yeah.
did put it on square, and it's the functionality still isn't 100%. So I wouldn't even worry with it. Just go ahead and kick it back to me.
Eric, I
Josh,
know you
I-
can. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, Garrett. What'd you say?
I was gonna. This is a dumb joke. I was gonna say you can do something similar with like square dot sister-in-law.
That's, oh my gosh, that would have made this so much more simpler too.
Yeah.
Cousin second removed.
Thanks a lot. Should have hopped in the co-working space sooner.
Yeah, Josh, I have no idea how you would do this without the previous sibling and the next sibling. Like I guess
Did
like,
parent element dot remove child.
Right, but that's after the struggle is finding the correct element to remove. You know,
right.
Yeah.
removing the element itself is pretty easy once you get there. It's just I remember struggling. Yeah, I think what we tried to do is make like a collection each time that you update, like an array of the elements in order, and then as you remove them from there. But it's finding the index is hard.
Right.
Yeah.
I think it's what you just said. Like I didn't know about the next sibling, previous sibling. So what I did was I used the document.get elements by class name by the squares thing. And then each time like I got it, like I would just check the index and make sure that where it was, like where the ID of the index was,
Right.
it wasn't either at the end or the beginning, because then I could throw the alert. Depending on if it was even or odd. And then anything after it was like, oh, if it's even, check if there's an index available afterwards. If there is, delete it. If there's one before it, delete it. So
Nice, dude.
that's how I ended up getting it. But yeah, way more complicated than just using the dot siblings.
Right.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, that's like me. I set a variable to square ID and said parse int, and then took the square div dot ID, subtracted 1. And then I went into document get element by ID, looking for that variable, and then executed based off of that variable.
Oh
And
no.
Nice.
yeah, and now just even explaining that, I want to take a nap.
Yeah, I would have had no idea how to attack that without that property. So
I tell you what I'm thinking now is like, how does the browser update that next sibling and previous sibling property between, edits to the document? I wonder how it does that. Y'all know what I mean?
Mhm.
Oh,
I
yeah.
have no idea.
Because if I hit
Um,
if I hit ID 8, its next sibling property is set to 9. And then if I delete 9, how does it reconcile that?
Well, it's not looking at the ID, it's looking at like the order of things in the thing that you're removing the sibling.
The order of the flow.
Yeah, so like it's looking at div
Hmm.
and it sees div after it in the load order. So it's
I
like
guess
not
so.
based on ID, it's based on like load order.
I'm just guessing because it has to be. That makes sense, right? But when it's a property that can be accessed, so I imagine it gets loaded. I don't know, Garrett. I don't even know if I'm making sense. I'm sorry, guys.
I think I had that issue because from the code that I stole had the parse int plus or 1 minus 1. And so it would remove the next block, but then it wouldn't remove any more blocks after that. And that's when I had to get help, and Garrett showed me or hinted me towards next sibling and whatever else. But yeah, I think if that's what you're talking about, is it would basically break the function after it removed one box.
Crazy, man.
Yeah, I have no clue. I just thankful for previous and next sibling, honestly. All right, guys. Well, I'm gonna head out. Thank y'all again.
Alrighty, y'all. Yeah, we'll see you
Yeah.
at 3:30.
Thanks,
Checking.
Haley.
Thanks, Haley. Did a great job.
I'm the host. I'm the one that has to end the meeting.
Do it.
I'm awake. Okay. I was like watching Dave.